Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Kind of one of those interesting days of lots of stories of the rioters and the traitors and the seditious Trump supporters being arrested. A good day, in my opinion. Some stories of, better scrub the servers. Don't want us recording our treason to be used against us. And I got to be honest, it made me think of my grandfather today, who was very clear. You never put anything in writing. Never. If you're going to do, he said, you never put anything in writing that you want your grandmother to read. And my executive producer today just told me that his mother is following him on Twitter. So now he has to behave. This is the thinking of the left, or some, or I should say the rational, the thinking of people who go, maybe we should be a little more considerate of each other and maybe not videotape our treason. My grandfather always said, you never leave a message of anything you don't want your grandmother to hear. And I think sage advice from a guy who only had an 8th grade education. And I think back to that. And, the smarter we become, or we think we become, the dumber and worse we become. I think back to his generation, who they were very direct. They were very honest. If you had a problem, you dealt with it. And we didn't have sedition and treason right before our very eyes. Very crazy. And, I saw this story about there being pipe bombs on Insurrection Day. At both the DNC and the RNC headquarters. Evidently, the night before they found these pipe bombs, and it got me thinking. Why haven't we seen more Republicans coming forth and denouncing this stuff stronger? I mean, we've got some of the minor lip service, but I mean, really coming out and saying, no, we need to get these people. We need to change our messaging. We need to stop with the bullhorn that used to be a dog whistle and condemn this stuff. It just hasn't happened. And, I look at the thing between AOC and Ted Cruz, and I completely agree with AOC. Sorry, I can't work with you. You're someone who's trying to have me killed. I get that. Completely understand it. And, I went into that a little bit yesterday, and I had a listener push back on, well, they're paid to do their job. And look, that's true. But I don't know how you can have this kind of extremism, the enemy within. And I look at these two women, the one from Georgia and one from Colorado, who really, really very, very crazy. And not insane crazy, just extreme. And I had a listener send me, this great image that has AOC on one side and Marjorie Taylor Greene on the other, and it just this, here's what the right is calling radical. And they went through, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's, her extreme positions, that people should have health care as a human right. That there should be universal single-payer healthcare. That's radical, extreme. That she supports a wealth tax. She supports union rights, pay equity. Oh my gosh, we can't possibly have that's socialism. She supports extending tax benefits to working and middle-class homeowners and families. Oh my gosh, that we can't do that, especially at a time when we had the tax heist of 2017 that did just the opposite. And it is now taking what little it did give away. It's crazy. Believes that quality education should be accessible to all people regardless of socioeconomic status. That's just heresy. Cannot possibly have that. Supports a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. Wants to combat climate change by creating of millions of high-wage union jobs in the new green industries. That is just too much. But perfectly okay is MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has stated outwardly that the Parkland massacre was a hoax. She literally harassed one of the kids, calling him a coward, chasing him down, saying, "I've got a gun I carry a gun. I've got a gun permit." Again, on the gun stuff, Sandy Hook was a staged false flag. Promoted the theory that Hillary Clinton murdered children in satanic rituals. This is okay for the Republican Party. Has seriously suggested that there were wealthy Jews with a space laser who were setting wildfires in California. I know, perfectly okay, right? Like the folks Facebook page, calling for the execution of Nancy Pelosi, and posted an image of herself holding a gun next to AOC with the caption, "We need to go on the offense." Yeah. But that's not inciting a riot. That's not, getting people all. No, it's not it. And the thing is, I had this listener who, was taken aback by my comments the other day that I said I once believed that once women eventually took everything over, that we might have a better place to live. We might be able to have a more equitable society. We may be able to raise our families in much better conditions. We might have less war and more sanity, less division and more cooperation, less hatred, a little more kindness. I look at MTG here. I look at that Lauren Boebert. I look at her, and I got to be honest. I'm the hope that I once had, and a lot of these very loud right-wing voices. I got to say that hope is diminishing. Seriously, it is. I had once believed that at one point that, women were smarter somehow. These folks continually believe that that's not true. Now, I guess I can look at this in a different direction. And this could be, if I need to take something positive from the crazy place that we're in right now, it's that women have achieved equality, that they're just as equal to be freaking bonkers in the brain as anyone else. I guess, and I don't really take any solace in thinking that. But it used to be just old guys in their basements with the tinfoil hats and remember the coat hangers that were metal and you could twist them like antennas and stuff. It used to be mostly men, very few women. It was exclusively men, and those were generally guys who couldn't get dates. And that probably started a long time before they actually put on the physical tinfoil hat. But now you've got women who are doing this, and it's scary, because now my hope for the future is diminishing, because, well, there are some really way out there women. And it's not that they're crazy in the sense of mentally ill. And I look at this call, evidently the bar in Georgia is asking this Lynn Wood, Lynn Wood is a man, but asking Lynn Wood to go through an evaluation to see if he is mentally ill. Now, he clearly is not going to do it, but my thought on this was, I don't know why the State Bar of Georgia would do this, because I don't think he's mentally ill. I don't think he's crazy. I don't think drugs would help. I think he's just evil. I think he's just a horrible person. Being in the public eye and doing the things that he's done creates this environment that, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say that he's mentally ill. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. And that's the thing that I think about Lauren Boebert. I think she knows exactly what she's doing, because I had someone else ask, well, which one's worse? I think they're both really bad. But to be honest, I think Greene truly believes all of the conspiracy stuff that she's consumed. She drank the Kool-Aid and then drank it again just in case. As Boebert, I think it's about money more than anything. I think it's about creating herself as this little media star, filling the void of the gun nut. Because she came into Congress like gangbusters with a whole really flashy PR campaign. And, look, she's the darling of the right because she's raising a lot of cash. And look, the left loves her too because she's now the chew toy that everyone gets to beat up on. Meanwhile, nothing really gets done. And, there are some who say, well, we need to check, mental health for all these people. And look, maybe it's a good start. Let's have mental health for everybody. I'm a big fan of mental health. But I think at the end of the road, we're just going to find that there are different kinds of people. There are people who are like me and folks, center to left, who care about other people. And I think the mask thing is a big part of that. I think if you're one of those people who absolutely, without question, refuses to wear a mask because, well, it's my right and you are definitely, you're a Republican. And that's a certain mindset. Hooray for me and the hell with everybody else. It's my right. I'll do what I want. And, society used to be able to deal with that. And people would be able to figure out how to bump along and not have to kill each other. Sadly, we're not in that moment. And I hope people are paying attention to these stories coming out. Like this 34-year-old woman who was basically, I guess, was dying on the Capitol steps as the crowd just stepped over her to go beat the policeman with the hockey stick and whatever else they had. And you go, now, hear what the right says about themselves, that they're good, God-fearing Christian people who just love each other and they just want to be left alone. And you look at these photos, you look at these videos, you look at this stuff and you go, them's not good, God-fearing Christian folk. Them's some screwy people. And you would think that, they would help get this woman somewhere. No, the video just shows, people stepping over. And the thing that gets me is I've always known that's who these people are. The Trump supporters, the people who are defiant in their wearing of the MAGA hats, and they bought the shirt, so they're all in. They're all in. I've always known that this is the crowd who they are. Because I've talked to them, I've heard their stories, I've heard some of their fantasies. Most gun owners I know, not the guy who just has one or two guns for got it from grandpa or needed it for hunting or hey I'm gonna just have it for protection. I'm talking the guy who's got 100 guns. I'm talking the guy who's got walls full of them, and those are people who everyone that I've ever met. It's all about using them. It's all about someday I'm gonna get my chance. Someday I'm going to be Joe Horn. And I'm going to see somebody robbing my neighbor's house and I'm just going to go shoot them out in the front yard. That's where I've never had that fantasy. And I don't know that I want to be around people who do. We are most certainly in screwy times. And the good thing is now there's attention paid to these people because they've been spewing hateful stuff for a very long time. And I've been following their Facebook posts and their Twitter posts and Parler when that was up, and just reading some of the most vile stuff. Thinking of my grandfather, who said you never write anything you don't want your grandmother to read. Thinking about these people's parents, and then wondering if they're writing it too. Have we gotten that far? My grandfather always said, as there's a banner in the school my kid goes to that says, you behave like nobody's watching. Behave like, your grandmother's not looking over your shoulder. Not happening. Now, I do find it interesting that how we're catching a lot of these people. A lot of them decided they were going to wear their work jackets to the riot, to the insurrection. So they've basically got their license plates right on them with their name. Like, the guy with the Olympic jacket, he was fun. You've got you've got all of these people just doing really bizarre stuff, and it's crazy. And they're now trying to scrub it, but trust me, it's all saved somewhere. And I'll tell you, one of the most distressing stories I came across today, it was yesterday, that the Capitol Police want to put up a permanent fence all around our Capitol because we've gotten that uncontrollable. And it got me thinking that, I remember when I was a kid, this is going back to the mid 70s. We used to go down to the 150th Street rapid station, and we would hop on the rapid, take it one hop into the airport. We'd come out on an escalator right at the gate, and you could see the planes taking off right from there. And we'd screw around with the guy or the woman at the metal detector, like, you should check him, he's got a gun. And you say that today, you'd be in Guantanamo Bay. But in my lifetime, you could get away with it. Check him, he's got a bomb. And it was, we would joke about, he's going to hijack the plane and take it to Cuba. And there were nobody flying out of anywhere, tackling you in the street. It was a joke. And we used to go and we would screw around at the airport for hours. And we would watch planes and we would talk to people, where they were coming from, where they were going. When I was a teenager, we used to park on the airport property. You remember parking if you're old enough, when you were a teenager, finding a spot, and you'd watch the planes go overhead. You can't do that stuff anymore. So that America that I grew up in, that place that was open and accessible and free because of, and I hate saying crazy, but I don't mean crazy in a mental health way. I mean just freaking crazy. Because of these crazy people, we're locking everything down. You can't go near anywhere anymore. And now we got to have this damn real ID card. Everywhere we go, we can't go into a federal building without the real ID. So we've figured out who you are. I'm hoping at some point we relax this stuff. We become decent people again. What happened to us? I'll tell you what happened. That American dream that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead, has died. And we need to bring that back. But I got lots of thoughts on that today. Got lots to get to. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Scott Dworkin is going to be here to share some thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day striking worker Anna Lopiazzo was shot and killed by local police during the pivotal Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. In what is considered one of the most important strikes in American labor history, the industrial workers of the world had organized a strike that brought out more than 30,000 textile mill workers at the American Woolen Company. Workers had been on strike for most of the month, picketing, marching, giving speeches, and stopping scabs. Their banners demanded a living wage and dignity, bread and roses. That day, there were workers' parades among pitched battles between strikers, police, and scabs. Gunfire erupted. According to Big Bill Haywood, 19 witnesses saw police officer Oscar Benoit shoot Anna Lopiazzo. The shooting provided the mill owners with an opportunity to crack down on the strike. Martial law was instituted, and all public meetings and marches were banned. The leading IWW strike organizers, John Edor and Arturo Giovannetti, were arrested for her murder, despite the fact that they were 2 miles away from the scene. Though they were eventually acquitted, their imprisonment removed them from directing the day-to-day work of the strike. But who was Anna Lopiazzo? According to Bruce Watson, author of Bread and Roses, Mills, Migrants, and the Struggle for the American Dream, if America had a tomb of the unknown immigrant paying tribute to the millions of immigrants known only to God and distant cousins compiling family trees, Anna Lopiazzo would be a prime candidate to lie in it. And indeed she was for 88 years, until retired IBEW 2321 business manager David Morris worked to get a headstone decorated with the Bread and Roses symbol of grain stalks and a rose for her pauper's grave. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So with all of the news coming out about this Marjorie Taylor Greene, and look, this is stuff that should have come out during the campaign. Oh, that's right. There wasn't really much of a campaign, and she got on the Republican side because I guess either nobody else filled out the paperwork right, or she just I don't remember, but somehow she got through. And I gotta wonder if she's gonna stay. But we got her for 2 years. But 2 House Democrats today have introduced a censure resolution against her. Those representatives, Nikema Williams and Sarah Jacobs, citing the fact that, she I guess said that, Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason and should suffer death or be in prison. Yeah, that's someone sitting in Congress. And here to share some thoughts on our latest bit of crazy in Congress, our good friend Scott Dworkin. He's the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the wonderful Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good. I got to tell you, I miss the good old days of whoever was crazy in Congress was at least fun. I miss Michelle Bachmann because she was crazy, but she was like a fun kind of crazy. She wasn't like I'm going to shoot you in the head kind of crazy like this woman.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene is, as we've investigated her over the past few weeks, and especially over the past few days as we've been releasing more video, it's apparent that she's an accomplice to the riots. She's an accomplice very clearly. She had a meeting at the White House in the weeks leading up to January 6th. She promoted January 6th at a constant. She invited people to the rally that turned into a riot. She then stayed with that messaging lane the day after. She did an interview we just released today. And in that interview, she did say that the fight is just beginning. And this is not a person that we want in Congress, just as Americans. It has nothing to do with her political party, which obviously she's on the fringe as it is. But, if Kevin McCarthy wants to play this game, that's fine. But I can tell you this, the videos are just going to get worse. And one of the videos we uncovered, she was assigned to the Education Committee, and she uses the R word in regards to disabilities. And it just was she's referring to members of Congress when she says this, and it's before she was elected, but it's just another thing that to add to the pile. And so it's not fitting for Congress, even this Congress, with so many Republicans that stood up and stopped the steal and whatnot. But she is one of Trump's biggest accomplices, because again, she was at the White House meeting about January 6th, and she was still pushing the big lie, afterwards, and still is now today.
Yeah, one of the places I'll push back on is you say she's on the fringe. I think by them being silent of her behavior, of her words, I don't think she's on the fringe. I think she is who they are, only she's dumb enough to say out loud what they say behind closed doors.
Yeah, there's a long 30-minute kind of documentary style on QAnon where she explains, plain speaks, the whole conspiracy theory, and tries to, be like, well, I don't know, and throw it out there. And so this is years and years of a person that has bought into the conspiracy theory, but it's less more of her buying into what everything stands for. It's more of her exploiting this and exploiting these people that are falling for this conspiracy, that are falling for that. And I think the Republican Party has a responsibility to stand up against that. And as we've seen from the state parties recently, that's just not going to happen. There's corruption that is that's spread to the state parties. I mean, you look at Arizona, they want a recount of the leadership votes because they don't believe that Kelly Ward won. And she's like, oh, we'll come up with a new way for us to recount votes. I'm like, how many votes do you have when you vote for the party chair? It's not going to be like more than hundreds, and it's probably on a computer. Like, think about what we're doing right now. So it's really it is unfathomable. I like to say fringe because even though it is normalized by the Republican Party, I don't want to normalize it, and that's why I still.
It's an excellent point, but here my point is that the current Republican Party is the fringe now.
Yes.
So normalizing that is is I'm hoping that there are some good, decent Republicans who don't identify with Green or Boebert or McCarthy or any of these people who are, in your words, out on the fringe. I'm hoping that they'll bring and I've been saying this for a lot of years now, that they'll bring their party somewhere back to the sane line.
Well, reality is going to set in very quickly here. The seriousness and gravity of everything starts on Tuesday night of next week, when Officer Brian Sicknick is going to sit in the rotunda of the Capitol through the night, and then there will be a congressional ceremony for him the next day on Wednesday, and then he'll be buried at Arlington because he's a veteran. So I mean, like, this is going to be a full-fledged funeral and a full-fledged viewing, and I think it's important for people to see the gravity of what happened and also talk about that. And so going into Wednesday, we'll hopefully be able to, dig in more about Mr. Officer Sicknick and his family and his friends, and tell his story so that we can get some people, we can humanize this event and actually pay respect to him. And what I've been saying lately is, if Trump had not said these things, if he had not planned this rally, if he had not funded this rally, if he had not told people that he was walking with them to the Capitol where they had impunity and they thought that he had led the charge inside the Capitol and they were just following him, or if he had not done any of this, or maybe even just one of the things, if he had not done, Officer Brian Sicknick would be alive now. And that's just, you can assume based on all the variables. Same thing with the 4 other people who died, who are his supporters, and then 2 other police officers who committed suicide since then. And so there's, at that point you have 7 dead bodies, 3 of them Capitol police officers. You have 140 different officers who have gotten brain damage from it, broken bones throughout the body, beaten into submission with flagpoles, and just disgusting, atrocious acts. And so again, I think people are, Republican Party is they tried to push it off. They tried to not face reality. But with that, and then the impending trial, which will be explicit with no real defense besides it's not constitutional, something along those lines, and he didn't cause it, but they're not going to be able to say, like, he had nothing to do with it. And so it's reality is going to sink in very quickly, and American people won't have a distraction of Donald, and everybody's going to be focused and honed in on this trial. And I don't think that, based on, having the impeachment crew that we have, I don't think that they're beatable. But I will say, as we move into this and we learn more about what happened and the truth about what happened, and more things are revealed, I think that there is a very distinct possibility of conviction. And if McConnell chooses to convict and he votes that way, that means he will be convicted, because there's no way that McConnell would vote without the votes behind him.
No, I agree with you on that. I just don't see the Republican Party having the spine to do it. I just don't. But I do agree with you. If McConnell votes to convict, that it's over. He is the bellwether, and if he does, it's over for him. But I just don't see them doing that.
It just depends on how it's presented. Again, I trust Reps Raskin and Swalwell, obviously a good friend of yours, and so I think the entire team, they know what they're doing, and they also have some practice at this. A lot of them were heavily involved with the impeachment last time. Now this is more serious, and I think when you go over the explicit details of here's the video of this person getting shot because they were doing X, Y, and Z, and they only did this because of Trump, and then here's this person who went in here and kicked his feet up in Speaker Pelosi's desk, and they only did this because, citing court documents, because they say that Trump told them to. And so you start going through this all, and it starts to stack up, and people are going to, this is going to be a big bet. This is where your political future lies. And so if you want to, this isn't going to be a vote whether or not you're Republican. It's a vote whether or not you're American. And so this is the country over party vote, and that's why they didn't want it. That's why they didn't want an impeachment trial. That's why they didn't want us to confront them with it, because they don't want to be reminded of it. They want to do what they do with school shootings, which is just steamroll over it. And thoughts and prayers. Well, sorry, buddy, that's not going to work this time. And I think that they know what's coming in regards to the reality check that starts really this week with Officer Sicknick lying in the rotunda.
Yeah, we're going to see in the coming days whether I'm right or other people are right. I think this should have been over by now. I think we should have, should have gone, 4:01 in the morning on the day after it happened. We should have had articles of impeachment. We should have immediately been running on this. But I have other people who have said, no, Rick, you're wrong. We shouldn't have done that haste. We want to draw this out so we can, as you've said, we want to have the funeral. We want to have all of this evidence so that the American people can see it. I got to be honest. I don't think the people who supported Trump or any of the Republicans care about the evidence or care about holding him accountable. So I don't see that it's going to matter. But I'm curious your thoughts.
It just depends. They'll have to act like they care, and they'll have to act like they're offended. They'll have to at least act like it. And so that enough may be enough for them to be turning on Trump. But what the House says doesn't matter. What House reps say, and what Nunes says, and Jim Jordan, they're not in the Senate. Nothing that they say is relevant to any of this.
Right. It's 17 senators that we need to convict.
Correct. There is a possibility. I can say, we were very optimistic come the last time when it came to removal. Obviously, the Democratic coalition helped run that effort, helped run both impeachment efforts. With this not removal but conviction and ban from running again, we are much more likely for conviction. I mean, I remember when people told me in 2017, "Don't waste your time on impeachment." Obviously, that was not a bad quest to take, but it takes a while, and just based on what I'm seeing, there are a lot of maybes and I don't knows yet, and it's not from the Democratic column. So, I would be surprised if there wasn't at least consideration by a lot of people. But again, there's going to be a slate of 10 or so Republicans that are not going to vote unless they have the votes for sure. And so that's going to be the trick, is like, are they going to pass a threshold where it's just too much and they just kind of tap out? They're like, okay, I didn't know about this evidence or video. We didn't know. And there's going to be a lot of that, I can tell you for a fact. And they've been able to compile this stuff for a while now and work in coordination with our intelligence services, because we have the Senate and the House and the White House now. So we get access to documents and videos and files, and it's a completely different world, upside down. And so I think again, reality, they don't have any excuse for this, and a lot of them are complicit with it and belong in prison with Trump. But I think that we should prosecute him from every angle possible for every single crime. And I've said, since day one, that we should have impeached him on day one. We should have not tolerated any lie. We should have impeached him for every single lie, every single crime that he committed. And we should never tolerate it. I would never tolerate it with President Biden or Vice President Harris. I would never tolerate them lying. And to date, they haven't gone out and done like even one brazen lie, like none. And they have a press secretary who is, brilliant, and obviously a person that is just phenomenal. Miss Psaki is really good at doing her job, and it's refreshing. But I'm still in that part where before unity comes accountability.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got to go back to something you said, though, because I guess you have a lot more faith in the people in the Senate than I do. I look at this purely from the political calculus game. I really don't think any evidence you show these guys are going to matter unless you can show them how it's going to either help or hurt them politically. I mean, the argument that I would make is getting Trump out of your party and not allowing him to run again so he can do a third party race against you is a good thing for you politically. Getting him away from the being the head of a third party run or any of that is good politically. I think you have to make something of that argument more than it's right or wrong, because we've seen repetitively, Scott, that they don't seem to care about right or wrong.
Yeah, they're going to choose really early on in the trial whether or not they're going to push to convict, because you'll see the messaging tilt one way or the other. And that's going to be McConnell's choice. And based on the evidence that they know is going to be presented, because I'm sure that they're going to have to present this evidence to them beforehand, or something along those lines, where they'll have access to it. They know what's going to be presented. And when I think when they see that, they'll make that game time decision. But I don't think the problem here is we've always had the issue of momentum, where we would have momentum in regards to a messaging to people, and they'd understand, and it would build, and they'd follow that story. Then all of a sudden Trump would tweet something out, and it's like, oh, wait. And it just boggles it all. They don't have that anymore. Yeah. That's not a weapon anymore. And I think that's going to be the biggest detriment to them. They don't have the social media presence they used to, which was fake in the first place. So I don't think, I think that it's, I'm optimistic because I have to be, because I'm not going to work on an effort that I don't believe in. And I will tell you this, I would not work on it if I didn't think that we had the potential for the votes. Do I think that they'd convict? I'm not as optimistic about it as 50-50 or anything like that, but it's still possible, and we have to make a vested effort and present our case to the American people, and make sure the American people correspond with their senators how they feel and where they should vote on that.
Yeah, it's like anything. You got to push them. You got to get out. You got to be loud. You've got to let them hear you. Call.
Never got
write. All of that.
We never got impeached ever. We would have never got impeached ever if we didn't push. I remember I called for his impeachment before he actually was sworn in. And it just, because I knew he was going to be in breach of it. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't push it out into the universe, then people wouldn't have been able to impeach him for the crimes he committed. Because if we weren't talking about it at a constant, as impeach him for this, we got to set the bar. And I think as we reset things here, again, the tragic reality of things will set in. And I think that momentum in regards to the American people waking up and realizing how serious this is, or being reminded of how serious it is, they're going to want the people who are co-conspirators and accomplices out of Congress. And so whether or not they stay, that's the Republican Party. I'm happy to support a Republican challenger in a heavy red district to run against people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I'm sure that we can come up with a bipartisan project with the Lincoln Project and some of our partners like Midas Touch.
There you go. Good stuff. As always, Scott, I appreciate the time. Fantastic stuff. I hope people keep following the work that you're doing. You're doing good stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Our good friend Scott Dworkin. I'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1834. That was the first time in United States history that a president called in federal troops to settle a labor dispute, and it certainly would not be the last. President Andrew Jackson ordered federal troops to quiet the workers on the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. The workers were predominantly Irish, but also included Germans, Dutch, and African Americans. They were digging a canal along the route of the Potomac River, which had rapids that made it difficult to traverse. The primary purpose of the canal was to bring coal from the Allegheny Mountains to eastern port cities. The goal was to connect the ports to the Ohio River and Ohio Valley. Work on the project was grueling. Rocky ground made digging the canal extremely difficult. Workers labored 12 and even 15 hours a day. They often had to work in ditches with mud or water up to their waists. They lived in poor conditions in shanty towns along the canal route. In 1932, cholera swept through the work camps, leaving death in its wake. Work stoppages plagued the project, which had originally been conceived by George Washington. 10 different significant incidents of labor unrest occurred during the more than 2 decades the project was underway. Workers became fed up with hard labor, low wages, and dangerous conditions. Andrew Jackson sent in troops to stop the workers' rebellion. The C&O Canal never made it to the Ohio Valley. The coming of the railroad derailed the completion of the project 180 miles from its planned ending point. All was not lost, however, as the president's action to send in troops to suppress workers set a precedent that others would follow in the years ahead. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Wall Street has had one of its worst weeks since October, they're saying, and they're blaming it partially, or I guess mostly, on the what's going on with GameStop. Their stock up, like 400% over the last week, like 1,600% over the last month. And lots of chaos going on around that. And, my mind is this is gambling. It's Wall Street. It's who it is. It's what they do. And some people figured out how to rig the system a little bit and make themselves a boatload of money. Question I have is what happens on the downside when this stock gets back to where it should be? Who gets left holding the bag? And it's probably going to be the little guy. But we'll see how that goes out. Here to explain what this is, how it is, why it is, all the ins and outs. I've asked Dean Baker to come talk with us. Dean is a senior economist at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. He's got a new piece out, the GameStop game and financial transaction taxes. Dean, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
So let's start with, how did this happen?
Okay, this is kind of a humorous story. It's a little complicated, but I'll try to just get to the basics. So GameStop, and I'll be the first here, I don't know a lot about GameStop. I literally had never heard of it until this adventure. But GameStop, many of your listeners, I'm sure, know way more about it than I do, but apparently it's a brick-and-mortar store where they sell video games, so online gaming. And anyhow, it's been hard hit, like many brick-and-mortar stores, even prior to the pandemic, but it went down even more with the pandemic. I should say its sales went down because obviously a lot of people aren't going out, and that's probably not their first priority if they are. So anyhow, it's been in very bad financial shape. And what happened, the basic story here is that Melvin Capital, a hedge fund, shorted GameStop. So what shorting means is that you sell the shares, you sell them at whatever the current price is. It had been around 20. I don't know when Melvin got in, did their short, but it had been around 20 if you go back a month or so ago. They shorted them, and the idea is that you have to buy them back at some point in the future. And the anticipation when you short a stock is that the price is going to fall. So you'll buy it back. If you shorted it at 20, in fact sold shares at 20, you'll buy it back at 10 or something like that, and then you can make a lot of money. At least if that happens, as you expect, in a relatively short period of time, you could do very well. So that's a common thing that, hedge funds, people with money tend to do. You wouldn't expect a small investor to do that. Well, the story here was that you have this Reddit finance, and you have Robinhood, a trading platform where people could trade at very low cost. And you have people on Reddit saying, let's get together and let's buy this stock. Let's buy GameStop. And I can't speak for what was going through their heads in terms of whether they thought GameStop was actually a good company or whether they just thought it was clever that, here's this big hedge fund with a big short position. Let's cause them some trouble. So, again, I can't speak to their motive. But the point was you had a lot of people, a lot of smaller investors with, 5,000, 10,000, some have paid more, many had less. And they all bought up GameStop at the same time. And it sent the price soaring. And suddenly Melvin Capital's in a situation where instead of being able to sell it at 10, the price is 40, the price is 50. It eventually peaked at over 400. And suddenly they were looking at a really big loss. Now, what likely happened, there's something that's referred to as a short squeeze, that when the price starts to go up, they have to close out their position because they can't cover it. And this is, again, I don't want to get too complicated here, but suppose that I had bought the stock at 20 and it goes down. Well, the most I could lose is $20 a share.
Correct.
I'm not happy about that, but that's the most I could lose. If I shorted at 20, well, I could lose, if it goes to 100, if it goes to 200, I could lose a huge amount. So Melvin Capital apparently hadn't covered their bet. You can get insurance. They won't go into details on that, but you can insure in various ways. But apparently they didn't. So what that meant was when the price started to go up, they suddenly had to buy the shares, contributing to go up even more. So it sent the stock absolutely soaring. Again, it peaked at over 400. I'm not sure what the absolute peak was, but it was over 400. Yeah, and it since has come down some, but I think it's still 280. I haven't checked the latest number on it, but it's still at a very, very high price. And again, it's you'd said what happened when it goes back down to earth. Well, presumably the people who bought it at 400 or bought it at 280, they're going to take a very big hit. Again, I can't speak to the company's prospects because I haven't tried to analyze it, but just on the face of it, I sort of think Melvin Capital is probably smart to short it because it doesn't look. Again, you could buy these games online.
Right.
So the advantage of being over to a store, a brick and mortar store, it doesn't sound like it's really worth very much.
Yeah, they're the Blockbuster of video games.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And Blockbuster, I imagine probably a lot of your listeners don't even know what Blockbuster is, but yeah, they were huge back when we had video cassettes first come out. We all went out and rented them. I did that. You did that, I'm sure, because that was how you got them. But, that's ancient history now, and they're long since out of business.
And I look at GameStop, and my question as this was going on is, why would you jump in the middle of this? Why would an investor jump in the middle of this? Because it's great while it's going up. If you bought at the bottom and it's going up, you want to continue to go up. But eventually it's got to come back down, and eventually someone's got to get bit. No.
That would be my expectations. You like to think, I in my piece, I sort of make a little fun of the idea of companies having true value, but at the end of the day, you do think that company stock price is at least in some way related to its profit. Now, I don't think it's a close relationship because we see all sorts of movements in the stock market. This is really extraordinary, but it's not unusual to see, stock go up 20% in the course of a month or 2 months and then go down by that amount and go, well, what was the right price? Well, maybe God knows, but I don't know, So, but,
it's the invisible
is it
hand,
gonna
right?
stay at 280 or something? Very hard for me to believe, but I'll just throw in my other qualification on this. Bitcoin, the outstanding value of Bitcoin, I saw it somewhere around $1.7 trillion. And what's Bitcoin? Well, it's literally nothing. So, do I think Bitcoin is worth 1.7 trillion or even 170 billion or even 17 billion? Answer no. But fact is, it's gone up. Maybe it'll go up more. I really have no idea. But it doesn't seem to have any intrinsic value as far as I could tell.
Yeah. Now, ultimately, this comes down to what I've always said about Wall Street. It's not investing; it's gambling. For the people who put their money into IRAs and their 401ks and their retirement plans, that's a little bit more long-term thinking, a little bit more of what we would think of as investing. But for the most part, when I think of Wall Street, I think of supercomputers making millions of trades a second. I think of people playing for pennies, and it's really just like a casino, and it's just like gambling. Is there a way to maybe pull some of this back? Your piece was about financial transaction taxes, which I'm a huge fan of. We should have had those continuous from they were back in the 60s, I think, when we had the Tobin tax. I think it was, but
Yeah.
This isn't investing. This is gambling. Is my point.
Yeah. So when you see certainly what's going on with GameStop, this is gambling. And again, some people could end up winners. Just like if you go to Las Vegas and you're lucky on the casino, you could walk away with a lot of money. Most people don't, of course. That's why the casinos are very wealthy. But yeah, it's gambling, and people end up losing money. A lot of people end up losing money. And it adds nothing to the economy, adds nothing to the market. So if you could discourage this with a modest tax, and I actually mentioned this piece, Representative Peter DeFazio just proposed a financial transactions tax. This is before this. I don't forget any idea this is going to happen. Last week. He proposed a modest financial transaction tax, 0.1% on a sale. So what that would mean is that if I sold $100 of stock, I would pay 10 cents of tax. So he proposes a modest tax, and that would have the effect of discouraging at least some of this gaming. So you'd mentioned before people buying and selling on a second, which you literally have. You have high-frequency trading where it matters to these traders literally a tenth or hundredth of a second. I'm not kidding at all. They spend a lot of money so that they can make their trade, millisecond faster than their competitors, because that's how they make their money. That adds nothing to the stock market, adds nothing to value. It's just a question, can they get the money rather than an ordinary investor?
Yeah.
So if you could if you could drive those people out with a modest tax, and this tax certainly would do that, a tenth of a percentage point, to my mind, that's all for the good. Now, that's not going to get all the gamblers out, but it will get some of them out. And at the very least, as I say in this piece, at the very least, we'll make some money on it. So, I throw out some hypothetical numbers. I really don't know how much money is going back and forth with GameStop. I said, let's imagine it's $50 billion. Well, with this tax, that would get the government $50 million. Not a huge sum in a $5 trillion budget, but also not totally chump change. So, to my mind, it makes the markets more efficient, better, things operate better, and it gets some money for the government.
No, I'm not a senior economist or an economist at all, but my mindset has always been I'm a big fan of a really heavy tax on trades done within minutes. You keep a stock a week, maybe we lower the tax. You keep it a year, maybe we say after if you've held it a year, there's no tax at all. Because for me, the idea is investing. If you're investing in something, that's not by second turnaround. Is there anybody talking about something like that? Because I think you have to punish the people who are really turning this into gambling and rewarding people who are truly investing.
Well, the problem with trying to do it by time, and people have talked about that, and I've looked into that. I think it is hard to do it in a way that can't easily be gamed. So I worry that the effort to do that might end up coming short in the sense that people will find ways around it. Because obviously there's a lot of money at stake, and if
They
they
always
can find
do.
a way to get around it, they will. I mean, we do have some incentives that way in the sense that the tax system as it is now, if you hold a stock, I should know this, I believe it's more than 6 months, it might be a year, it's been changed at different points. But in any case, you pay a capital gains tax rate, which is, for high-income people, it's 20%, as opposed to the tax rate of normal income, which is 37%. So that does discourage, at least as individuals. Now, from the standpoint of a company that, is paying corporate tax rate, it won't matter at all. But if you or I, we're looking to buy a stock at 2 o'clock and sell it at 3, we would be paying a higher tax rate if doing that rather than holding it for a year.
Interesting. Let me ask you the other side of this. Is what happened with GameStop and I guess AMC and I guess there's some other ones. Is this a bad thing? I mean, is this something that should be strictly discouraged, outside of what the companies were doing, with Robinhood, shutting off trading and some of the stuff along that. And now we find out that Robinhood was figuring out where people were putting stuff and using that, selling that data. At least that's what I've been told. Is this a bad thing to have happen?
Yeah, well, there's an issue of stock manipulation, which I think is bad, and it happens. It's not uncommon to happen. So you have a lot of big actors in the market who do play games with stocks. So one of the things that you could try to do, not you or I probably, I don't know how much money you have, but I get you don't have billions sitting around. So you start buying up shares of the stock, driving up the price. Other people see that the price is going up, and they start buying it, and then you dump your shares. So that's an old trick, dates back from forever probably. But that's something that, if you have a lot of money, you could do. Now, that's illegal if it could be shown that that's what you were doing. Now, unless you're really foolish, you don't write emails all over the place saying, hey, I'm pushing up the price of this or that stock. So it's hard to track that down. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just that it's hard for that to be tracked down and for the Securities and Exchange Commission to have civil penalties or even criminal penalties if you could prove it at that level. In this case, it does look like it's an issue of stock manipulation. Again, I haven't gone through what was going through people's heads, what people are writing on Reddit. But if you had people saying, oh, let's drive up the price, not because they think that GameStop's a good company, not that they think that GameStop's really worth, 100 or 200 or 300. They just go, hey, let's screw Melvin Capital and, push up the price. Well, in principle, that's illegal, So, I'm not anxious to see these guys going after. I don't think anything's criminal. I don't think anyone's going to end up in jail. But if they actually acted to manipulate the price, then that's in principle illegal. And, again, a lot of people will say, well, what about the big boys on Wall Street? They never get caught. Well, that's true. But if you do it out in the open, if you're on Reddit and you're writing it down, let's go do it. Well, then, they have the evidence. So if you did this to manipulate the stock price, that is illegal. And, again, we're better off in a market where no one's manipulating it. Again, I don't mean to say for a minute that these are the only people who ever tried to manipulate stocks. That's, of course, not true. But they had the misfortune that they did it openly. Again, I don't know anyone's going to try to pursue them, but that is against the law.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I've been mocking the people who engaged in the riot and the sedition on January 6th of, recording their own treason on social media. And you've got these folks who are, who are committing crimes in the open. So the question is, do people go after them? Because there got to be, millions of them, right?
There's a large number. Again, I don't know how many were involved. I mean, the other source you could go after is Robinhood and Reddit. And again, what their responsibilities are as platforms, you'd have to look at very carefully. But in principle, if you're a knowing party to the manipulation, which at some point Robinhood presumably was, I mean, you do have people running the company that I imagine aren't morons, they know what's going on, then there may be an issue of liability there. Again, I'm not enough of a legal expert to answer that. But if you're a party, if you end up being a knowing party, not that they actively tried to do it, but they obviously knew what was going on and they were making money off of it, then they may have some legal culpability there.
Yeah,
I'd rather see, if it's a question coming down on someone, I'd rather see them going after the platforms because, again, you want to make sure, well, you can't make sure this never happens again, but you want to make it less likely that something like this happens again. Just because, again, it's not that I have any sympathy for Melvin Capital at all, but you just don't want to create a situation where you're having stock manipulation. And obviously, as I say, it happens from the big boys. If you could stop it there, absolutely do it. But when you have, a mass of actors like this doing it, yeah, you should try to stop it.
Yeah, well, I guess the last question I've got for you, though, there's a whole industry, around this. It's just not Reddit, one of these message boards. I mean, you turn on, CNBC or, any of the, Fox Business or any of these where you've got Kramer or any of these talking heads who are out there either, saying, you buy this or don't buy that. How's that any different?
Well, again, the question is whether they're giving advice based on their honest opinion or whether they're giving advice based on the sense getting kickbacks. And there was a famous Henry Blodgett. He I don't know if he formally confessed, but he was charged and paid a lot of money as a fine. He was an analyst for, I believe, was Merrill Lynch back in the dot-com days, and he was touting stocks that he had an interest in. So, if Kramer gets out there, he might give bad advice. I mean, he's entertaining. I've seen him a couple times, very entertaining character, and I have no idea what sort of research he does. I mean, I wouldn't invest based on his advice, whatever. But in any case, there's no crime to giving bad advice, and he could, as long as it's honest. But if he's getting paid to hype this stock or talk this stock down, well, that is against the law. That's stock manipulation. So again, that's the sort of thing. It's not easy to prove, but if you find a check from someone at Merrill Lynch to Kramer saying, "Hey, will you hype this stock?" Well, then you can nail him. That's against the law.
There you go. Well, we'll see how it's going to play out. It's entertaining, if nothing else. But Dean, I appreciate you taking some time and explaining this to us. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
I appreciate it. Dean Baker, senior economist there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. We'll get a link out to his piece here in a second on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Sometimes you have to sit down in order to stand up for your rights as a worker. That's what workers in the Firestone rubber plant proved in Akron, Ohio on this date in labor history. The year was 1936. Akron, Ohio was the heart of the rubber industry in the United States, employing upwards of 40,000 workers at its peak. But during the Great Depression, as many as half of these workers were laid off. The rubber workers had unionized, but the bosses in the factories demanded the speed up of labor, added more hours to the workday, and harassed union leaders. They did this because they knew if workers walked off the job to protest the unreasonable demands, desperate, unemployed workers stood by at the ready to replace the strikers as scab labor. Frustrated, workers at Firestone decided to simply turn off the machines and sit down in the factory. Rubber workers had first tried out this tactic on a smaller scale 3 years earlier. The tactic proved to be successful because factory owners could not bring replacement labor into an occupied factory without risking damage to their equipment. Sit-down strikes occurred throughout the rubber plants in Akron, forcing owners to the negotiating table. The wave of sit-down strikes spread throughout the country. On this success, a wave of sit-down strikes spread throughout the country. In places like Flint, Michigan, where United Auto Workers occupied a General Motors plant for 40 days. And places like Hershey, Pennsylvania, where chocolate workers sat down for better wages, hours, and conditions. These sit-down strikes helped usher in an era of expanded union recognition. sitting down on the job helped these workers to win a seat at the bargaining table. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
What does your toothbrush, a fish dinner, and your running shoes have in common? Plastic. We now live on planet plastic. Billions of tons of waste from everyday products made of these chemical contaminants are strewn literally everywhere, on the highest mountaintops, into the deepest seabeds, in dense tropical jungles, and all across barren deserts. It's estimated, for example, that in less than 30 years, the gross volume of discarded plastic in our oceans will outnumber fish. From grocery carry-out bags to shower curtains to almost invisible bits of microplastics, the vast tonnage of this trash increases every minute, with an afterlife lasting centuries, wreaking havoc on ecosystems, destroying species, and infusing our water, air, soil, food, and us. Consider just 2 common products, your toothbrush and your sneakers. Until the 1930s, toothbrushes were made of degradable natural components. Since then, practically all have been throwaway plastic brushes. But there is no away, so nearly all of the trillions of brushes we've discarded in the past century are still out there, somewhere on the land or in our water. Moving from your teeth to your feet, consider that millions of sneakers are sold in the U.S. each year, advertised as being athletic and cool. What's uncool is that they're made almost entirely of melted and molded plastics that are practically impossible to recycle. So, after a short time in our closets, sneakers spend an eternity as globs of toxic plastic trash. This is Jim Hightower saying, we're being choked by our own synthetic waste, from billions of plastic bottles and cigarette filters to tons of straws and synthetic rubber tires. To help stop the insanity, contact Beyond Plastics, beyondplastics.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, according to Jacobin Magazine, they claim that Representative Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, he and his wife, I guess, are big into real estate there in Oklahoma. Got a bunch of rental properties. It's being alleged by Jacobin that they're booting people to the curb. They have filed eviction notices for what they say, quote, are non-payment of rent, fees, or other charges, and non-payment of rent fees and other charges. They're basically booting people out of their rental units during a time of pandemic when there is an order in place, a moratorium on evictions. And this is one of those moments where you go, now understand, Mark Wayne, he's not Bruce Wayne. He's willing to boot people out during a pandemic. And this is another example of, it's tough to be poor in America. Not only is it tough to be poor, it's really freaking expensive. Because here's the thing, sadly, these folks don't have the money to defend themselves. If they had the money, they'd have paid the rent. And also, sadly, they don't have the knowledge to know that they can fight it. So we're going to end up with people living on the streets, and that is unconscionable, especially coming from a sitting U.S. congressman who should know better. But that's why I've asked Colleen Shaddox to come talk with us. She's the author of Broke in America, Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty. Colleen, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
So you basically wrote the autobiography of my life. I'm usually broke in America. But sadly, I guess fortunately for me, not as bad as a lot of folks, especially people being booted to the curb by our friend here, Mark Wayne.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Made all the more disgusting when you consider that during the pandemic, the wealth of billionaires in this country cumulatively has increased $1.1 trillion. So the mess we're in now is really just exacerbating the mess that we've always been in. that there's a tremendous inequality in this country. We know that even before the pandemic, 40% of us couldn't meet our basic needs for things like shelter and food. And that's ridiculous and unnecessary.
No, you're absolutely right. I go back to Mark Twain there, basically flouting the law, figuring that people aren't going to know it. Part of the problem is we've set up all of these programs and all this policy that you have to know exist and then know how to navigate, which sadly, most people don't have the time or the ability to navigate. And that's exactly why they set them up like that, so that you don't get through these systems.
Yeah. I mean, you talk to legal aid lawyers and they're heroes, but they'll spend hours and hours and days and months getting people what is only rightfully theirs, which is why in the book we look at hardcore bread and butter pay issues. Americans wouldn't be in this vulnerable state if we all made a living wage. And, I'm going to quote a bunch of stats I'm sure that since the 1970s, we've been losing ground as workers. Wages have gone up for the average worker 12%, while they've gone up for CEOs more than 900%. And that's a period where healthcare costs went up 103%. So obviously we're falling behind. We're told this story that the way to get ahead is to work hard. My co-author and I, Joanne Goldblum, we interviewed hundreds of people living in poverty for this book. Most of them work harder than Joanne and I do, but it's just not enough. So they're working 2 and 3 jobs because they're just not making real wages.
Yep. No, I say this every time there's a new president, and I wished it for every president that I've been on the air. I want you to be the guy who returns reward to work. I want to reinvigorate or breathe life into that thing that I grew up believing as a kid, that if you worked hard, you played by the rules, you got ahead. Sadly, that's not reality, because as you've so accurately pointed out, there are a lot of people working really, really hard, 2 and 3 jobs, and like a hamster on the wheel, they never get ahead. And that's a serious problem. And for me as a union guy, it comes back to we need to expand people's ability to join and form unions and to collectively bargain. But we need to go beyond that. And there's a whole bunch of ideas that we should be pursuing. And I'm hoping the Biden administration is going to do some of that.
Well, I see some hope in what they're doing. Naturally, I want more. A $15 an hour minimum wage by 2025 is certainly better than anything else anyone has offered. I would argue that $15 an hour minimum wage right now is not enough for most people to meet their needs. I would certainly like to see Medicare for all. But my great hope with the Biden administration is not Biden or anyone else in the administration per se. It's the fact that we have a functioning government now.
There's
and
a
that
start.
People like you and me can exert power on our government and say, this is not acceptable. This is not sustainable. We need to end poverty in the United States. We can.
Well, we most certainly can. We're the richest nation in the history of civilization at its wealthiest point. As you pointed out a minute ago, our heavy 600, the 600 billionaires that we created through lower wages and lower opportunities, they wildly profited from this pandemic, while millions of people have lost their jobs, their savings, their health care, their future. And they're probably never going to get that stuff back. But at least our billionaires are well taken care of. That's something we can take solace in, no?
Yeah, good to know. And the other thing about poverty in America is that once you get kicked into it, it's really hard to get kicked out. You mentioned all those people that Mark Twain is evicting. Once you've been evicted, it's really hard to get someone to rent to you again. Once you've fallen behind in a utility bill, it's hard to get utilities again. And if you can't get utilities, you can't get a place to live. It goes on and on. The recovery is just amazing. In my state, if you have received public benefits, we have something called a welfare lien. And if you should happen to inherit a couple of $1,000 or win the lottery or whatever, and you receive benefits at some point in the past, the state will come take it.
That's insane. And I know that the state of Pennsylvania wanted to do that, and they may have under my nose without us knowing it. But what infuriates me about that is we're going to go after somebody who's at the bottom who may have gotten a little bit of something, right. But we never seem to focus on those people at the top who are taking everything. And well, I guess it's because we don't see them every day, isn't it?
Right. We're really segregated. We are segregated racially, we're segregated economically, so we don't see people. So that was Joanne and I's work, was to go and see people. And one thing you talked about hard work and getting ahead. One of the most heart-wrenching places I went was a little town called Lytle, Texas. Very poor agricultural area. Lovely people who were really trying to help their neighbors, but who just didn't have that much to help with. I met this one young man who was an outstanding student, an athlete, working almost full-time to contribute to his family, his large family. He had gotten a full ride to a university, and he wasn't going. And the reason that he wasn't going was because his father was being audited. His father was a waiter. I mean, his father was not sacking away millions. And because of that audit, his financial aid got a hold on it, and he couldn't do it without that. Now, the rest of the story is the Trump administration specifically targeted South Texas, predominantly Hispanic areas for tax audits. So that kid did everything right. That kid was Horatio Alger. He was so smart and polite and lovely, and it didn't matter.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And, we hear these stories time and time again. And look, the Trump administration, much like the Bush administration as well, they stopped going after the rich people with their audits and focused solely on people who didn't have the means to fight back, like a waiter. Why are you auditing a waiter? How much could he possibly have cheated you out of? A couple of pennies?
Well, I mean, that's so common, though, in all these programs where we try and catch poor people getting away with something.
Yep.
Inevitably, if you go after food stamp fraud or something like that, the investigative cost is going to outweigh anything you get, because there just aren't that many people doing it.
Yeah, because they're using the food stamps they're using to actually buy food with. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Colleen Shaddox. Her book, Broke in America, Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty. We'll make sure we get links out so you can take a look at this. You brought up, the fact that, people are going to be homeless out of this stuff. And yes. my mindset has always been we can solve any problem, but homelessness being one of those that we could easily solve. We could easily give people homes and they could live in those homes. And my idea has always been we chuck the idea of a philanthropy incorporated. We get rid of the entire charity organization, all of the business that is taking advantage of poor people. And we use that money that we give them in tax breaks to actually fund this stuff so that people don't have to beg for charity. They can actually just own their own home and take some pride in that. I mean, it's like a lot of things. I think we should be ending a lot of social programs, a lot of the handout programs, and have jobs programs. I think we should have the government be the employer of last resort. If the private sector can't or won't create enough jobs, the public sector should have to, so that we don't have to beg. Your labor gets you what you need, and you can survive, and you can live and thrive a decent life. I'm curious your thought.
Well, homelessness is a really interesting problem to start with, because the assumption is that the homeless person needs to be fixed. The homeless person
they need a home,
mental health training or drug, there's something wrong with this guy, or why would he be sleeping on the street? Overwhelmingly, the people who are sleeping on the street are sleeping on the street because they can't afford rent.
Yep, they're broke.
I mean, you notice the guy who's talking to himself more, but you pass homeless people on the street every day and you don't even know it.
Yep.
Homelessness is a math problem. Everything is a math problem in this country. And I'm not saying that there aren't other forms of oppression. I'm not saying that we don't have to do something about sexism and racism. But if we started with giving people a fair wage and making sure that those people who couldn't work for whatever reason got benefits that actually sustained them, we could eliminate poverty.
We could spend our
hard.
dollars more efficiently, and this is my problem with the whole charity incorporated. We got a bunch of people who fund a lot of things because it makes them feel good about themselves. It's really not about the cause. And that's what's, as someone who grew up in poverty, grew up in a housing project, I lived a lot of this stuff. So, in talking about how we deal with poverty, I have some ideas. I don't have all of them, not like you have written a fantastic book, but I think what we're doing ain't working.
No, it's not. It's clearly not. And I will say, like, I think a lot of nonprofits are really well-intentioned, and some of them are doing great stuff.
Sure, yeah, but
the stuff that tends to attract funding, I think, is the least efficient stuff. Funders want something that is new and innovative. Giving people houses isn't new and innovative. Feeding people isn't new and innovative. But if you don't meet people's basic needs, how are they ever supposed to get up? Poverty is a kind of a quicksand. I remember interviewing one woman who ran a jobs program. She trained women who were on public assistance to work in manufacturing. So, good, solid jobs, lots of demand, fair wage. They tended to stop attending the program during the winter because they didn't have heat in their apartments and they all got sick. Now, the job training was great, but it had to come with some sort of support that would make them actually able to take advantage of it. And I think that's where we miss out very often.
No, and then they also train them, as you point out in the book, for low wage jobs. I mean, the lowest of the low wage jobs, to where they're never going to get ahead. Because I steal a line from Ronald Reagan, because I agree with the sentiment that Reagan. Not a big fan of Ronald Reagan. I agree with the sentiment. The best anti-poverty program is a job. I've amended that. The best anti-poverty program is a union job with superior wages, good health care, and some retirement security. If we could get that for every working person, we'd be well down the road to make sure that we have poverty whipped.
Well, of course, the whole 1970s on period that I'm talking about, where people lost real wages, that coincides exactly with the period where fewer and fewer workers were represented by a union.
Again, that's
we
policy.
know that right now, the boss has the power, the worker doesn't. That's why, we talked with CNAs who during the pandemic were working in multiple nursing homes. It was a really dangerous thing to do for public health. And they did that because they had to feed their children. And the wage they got wouldn't feed their children. That's ridiculous. And that's bad for all of us.
No, it is crazy. But, I have my religious friends who like to remind me that, they always quote Matthew 26, that, the poor are always going to be with you, or something like that. We need the poor because it's been ordained by God, and it keeps us on the hamster wheel. So we keep showing up to those jobs. How do you break that kind of thinking that, well, you know what? We're always going to have them, Colleen. We're always going to have poor people. It's the way things are. The cream rises to the top.
Yeah, well, not really. A lot of times the cream gets whipped. When Jesus said that, by the way, he was speaking to Judas, who was somebody he knew was going to die soon. So the poor would always be with Judas, but not with you and me. That's a choice. And the way I think we break that down is to show people that people aren't in poverty because they are lacking in knowledge or ambition or character. They're in poverty because most people really struggle to make a decent wage and support their families. What I talked about, wages go down, 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 expenses go up, up, up. That creates poverty. It's not a personal failing, but we very frequently saw that. Even when we were talking with people whose job was to serve people in poverty, they would have very dismissive things to say about them. They were very distrustful of them a lot of times. Not everybody, but some people. There is this assumption that, they want to take it easy. being poor is not pleasant.
No. And no, I tell this story all the time. And, I was 8 years old and I'm older now, but it's with me like it happened yesterday. We were on food stamps and I had to take this clown money to the local store. And the woman behind the counter just made the biggest deal about buying a Nutter Butter bar, that I shouldn't be able to buy this. That's not something you people should have. And it was this horrible, degrading, humiliating, angering moment in my life that if I knew where they buried her, I would go dig her up so I could kill her again. That's the kind of visceral reaction. And even to this day, I'm still ticked about it. No one should have to go through that indignity just so they can eat. Not in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization.
Yeah. I remember interviewing one man for the book who kept telling me, I'm a good person. I really am. Of course you are. Why would I suspect otherwise? At one point in my life, I ran a soup kitchen. And I had a particular relative who used to always say to me, do you think they really need it? And I would always say, no, I think they come for the ambiance of standing in line in a basement to eat off a metal tray.
Yeah, hold, let me stop you right there. How come I never hear that question? Because I've heard that too. How come we never hear that about Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos?
Yeah. Jeff Bezos makes more than $2,500 a second. I don't think he really needs it.
No, I think we could use that much better by, taking that and giving people somewhere to stay, giving some children an opportunity to get a good education, and all the things that come along with that. Because, one of the things that I think most people don't think about, and, the minimum wage issue is coming back up as you alluded to earlier. So I'm now getting all of these people who are going, well, when I was a kid, I got a minimum wage job and it taught me hard work and taught me, stick-to-itiveness and showing up on time and, all of these things that they now think are wonderful about themselves. And then they were able to go to college and lead really great lives. And I'm going, but here's the thing. You were able to do that as a stepping stone. This is these folks' lives. That minimum wage that was a little bit of extra money so you could go out on the weekends that you just kind of ticked away. This is what they have to survive on. And if we don't make work pay for those people, why would, honestly, I wouldn't work for minimum wage. I'd figure out anything else to do.
Yeah, we know that the fast food industry is employing more and more women in their 30s. So in other words, moms. And, the idea that a weekend job is so Skip and Muffy can go to the movies, that's a pretty privileged way of looking at the world.
Yep.
When I was in high school, my job helped put food on the table. That's true for a lot of people. And is actually keeps a lot of kids from attending school quite as much as they should. The biggest educational problem for children in poverty is attendance. They miss a ton of school because they have adult responsibilities, or they get sick more often because their asthma isn't managed, or they don't have a winter coat. This idol of childhood that we have, it's not true for everybody.
No, you're right. You hit the asthma thing. I had horrible asthma as a kid. And it turns out now that I look back on it, we were right in the line. I lived in Cleveland. When the airplanes would fly into Cleveland Hopkins Airport, we were literally right under the runway. So there was that. There was the pollution. There was also the places were infected with bugs, and my mother would spray bug spray, and that just caused horrible asthma for me. So that's just another memory. Real quick, I want to get to two more things. You talk a little bit about UBI, Universal Basic Income. And, I have my conservative friends who are losing their minds going, you just want to give people free money to lay around and do nothing. And I have to remind them that this isn't a hippie liberal idea. This was actually an idea that Milton Friedman came out with in the 60s, something called a negative tax, which eventually turned into Reagan signing the Earned Income Tax Credit. So this doesn't have hippie liberal roots. This is actually the business community saying, hey, we need consumers.
Right, exactly. And the biggest American experiment in UBI was under the Nixon administration, and it was run by a young Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. Nixon very nearly made that policy. It's not a crazy idea. As I said earlier, 40% of us can't make our basic needs. So you've got a consumer society where people can't afford to consume. You know, even evil old Henry Ford wanted to make sure that all of his workers could afford to buy his cars. We can't continue to separate all the money out in this society into a very, very privileged, small group on top. And more of us at the bottom just saying, hey, I can't get by.
No.
Like, that won't work. It simply won't work.
No, and this is where it brings me to my last point. You know, you talk about voting in the book and how important voting is because, you know, if we're going to change anything, it's going to be getting, you know, some of these people that have been way too long into elected office, who have been holding up any progress, any ability to get Medicare for all, or some decent cradle to grave kind of health care, and we can call it whatever you need to, or to strengthen labor laws, or raise the minimum wage. It's been over 12 years now since the last time the minimum wage was increased, which is just, you know, just horrible. But it comes down to voting. Rich people vote at a much higher rate than poor people. How do we get poor people to vote?
Well, for one thing, we can take down barriers. And I know a lot of people who are working on that right now. We need to work on that not 2 weeks before the election, but all the way through. You know, any barrier that makes it harder to vote is going to weigh more heavily on poor people because they can't afford to lose the paid time to stand in long lines, etc. You know, we're the only country where registration isn't automatic, where, you know, if we really wanted people to vote, would we do it during working hours on a Tuesday? It's crazy. We really need to open up the elections, and we need to find a way around Citizens United so that politicians are not speaking to the highest bidder. Even, I would say, folks that I consider fairly on the up and up in Congress realize that they have to spend an awful lot of their time talking to rich people.
Yep.
They spend more time fundraising than they spend legislating.
Absolutely. I have a friend.
These races are ridiculously expensive.
It's crazy. I have a friend who was a congressman who said, "Look, you know, no one ever bought my vote, but it bought you 15 minutes of my ear."
And that's incredibly valuable. I mean, we all activists like me, we fight for that like crazy.
Yeah. Again, the book Broke in America, Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty, written by Joan Samuel Goldblum and Colleen Shaddox. We'll make sure we get links out on how you can pick up this book. Highly suggested. Colleen, I appreciate you taking time for us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day striking worker Anna Lopiazzo was shot and killed by local police during the pivotal Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. In what is considered one of the most important strikes in American labor history, the industrial workers of the world had organized a strike that brought out more than 30,000 textile mill workers at the American Woolen Company. Workers had been on strike for most of the month, picketing, marching, giving speeches, and stopping scabs. Their banners demanded a living wage and dignity, bread and roses. That day, there were workers' parades among pitched battles between strikers, police, and scabs. Gunfire erupted. According to Big Bill Haywood, 19 witnesses saw police officer Oscar Benoit shoot Anna Lopiazzo. The shooting provided the mill owners with an opportunity to crack down on the strike. Martial law was instituted, and all public meetings and marches were banned. The leading IWW strike organizers, John Edor and Arturo Giovannetti, were arrested for her murder, despite the fact that they were 2 miles away from the scene. Though they were eventually acquitted, their imprisonment removed them from directing the day-to-day work of the strike. But who was Anna Lopiazzo? According to Bruce Watson, author of Bread and Roses, Mills, Migrants, and the Struggle for the American Dream, if America had a tomb of the unknown immigrant paying tribute to the millions of immigrants known known only to God and distant cousins compiling family trees, Anna Lopiazzo would be a prime candidate to lie in it. And indeed she was for 88 years, until retired IBEW 2321 business manager David Morris worked to get a headstone decorated with the bread and roses symbol of grain stalks and a rose for her pauper's grave. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
In talking about poverty and talking about how we deal with this, it's a policy issue. It comes down to we can make the right choices. We just choose not to. And there was an interesting clip of a woman giving congressional testimony that I saw today. And she's talking about that she doesn't have health insurance. And they don't make a lot of money. And her daughter needed some kind of therapy. And I don't actually know what kind of therapy the girl needed. But it came down to the mother had to decide, do I get the dental work that I need done? Do I get this dental procedure that I need done? Or do I spend the resource that I have, the little money that I have, to make sure my daughter gets what she needs to help her lead a productive life? The doctors are saying, no, you got to have this. This is important. She's got no health insurance. She's got none of this stuff. And, she's got to decide, which way do I go? What do I pay for? So like any parent, and I think any parent would do this, you go, I'll put up with the dental pain for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or whatever I have to do to get through it. Well, don't you know that like anything that you put off, it magnifies. She ended up getting a huge infection. Waited too long to go and have it looked at, and it ended up, basically taking over her entire mouth, and they took all of her teeth out. And here's the worst part of it. It's almost unfathomable to believe that the coverage that she had, what little healthcare coverage she had, wouldn't pay for her to get general anesthesia to go under. So they put her under, like a local kind of thing, and they ripped all of her teeth out and scraped the bones and did all of this horrible stuff while she was, like in twilight. And she tells the story of, all the way home, just sobbing, being in such horrible pain. And you go, was that necessary? I mean, because if you think about it in the big picture was she got what she needed when she needed it. You solved the problem right at the beginning, and it didn't cost a boatload of money down the line, and end up pushing her towards bankruptcy. Her daughter would have gotten what she needed right when she needed it, so it didn't magnify down the road until either it would cost 10 times as much to fix whatever her problem is, or not fix it at all, and now you've got somebody who's disabled. I mean, we are such short-term thinkers. And it's scary stuff. So, as I was watching this video, and I'm thinking about this book as I was preparing for, to talk to Colleen, I couldn't help but think of those moments when I was a kid where, we'd have to go wait for hours at the free clinic, and you always got, crummy care because everyone's overworked and understaffed. Or you just didn't go and you suffered through it. And as she was talking about, I can't tell you how many days I missed a school because I was sick, because, my asthma was acting up. How many times I couldn't go outside because I couldn't breathe. And it's because of the environment in which I lived in. We can do better than this. And I guess, when people go, how are you a liberal? And I go, this is it. This is how I got here. And my wanting to make sure that no other 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid goes through what I went through. And I guess that's what makes me different than a lot of my white working class male peers. That I want to make sure that no one's child suffers. That we do smart things. We fix problems now instead of waiting for down the road. And we're a little less judgmental of those behind us. And that we actually reach back and help people up the socioeconomic ladder instead of stepping on their fingers. Just my thought. Again, the book, I hope folks will take a look at it. It's called Broke in America, Seeing, Understanding, and Ending U.S. Poverty. Highly suggest it. We got links out on social media. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share us some top stories of the day. Right back after this.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Today is Climate Day at the White House, and which means that today is Jobs Day at the White House.
Green News Report special coverage. President Biden launches historic government-wide climate action.
That historic action and our special coverage straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Let me be clear. We're not going to ban fracking.
Okay, Joe, you don't have to rub it in. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you've been waiting 20 years or so for this day. A very ambitious climate change agenda from the White House.
Oh, yes. Just 1 week into his presidency, President Joe Biden made good on his campaign promise to launch a whole-of-government approach to solving man-made climate change. On Wednesday, Biden unveiled a sweeping, historic climate action plan to create millions of jobs, set the nation on the path to 100% clean electricity by 2035, and reach net zero emissions by 2050 with a central focus on environmental justice.
So no carbon emissions from power generation by 2035 and carbon neutrality by 2050, right?
Oh, yes.
And how does that stack up against other nations and their targets around the world?
It puts the U.S. in line with what other nations, especially the Europeans, have already set.
So we're catching up.
Yes. In a speech at the White House, Biden listed the costs of repeated extreme weather disasters and deadly pollution and highlighted the jobs boom that will result from addressing the critical need to upgrade the nation's crumbling infrastructure for resilience.
It's a future of enormous hope and opportunity. It's about coming to the moment to deal with this maximum threat that's now facing us, climate change, with a greater sense of urgency. In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer.
The Biden climate plan is seriously huge and historic, and it is in keeping with the speed and scope that climate scientists say is necessary to avoid catastrophic climate impact. It dwarfs the policies of the Obama administration. The executive orders and actions signed by Biden focus on both domestic and international climate action and environmental justice, helping frontline and marginalized communities affected by pollution and ensuring equity in federal infrastructure and clean energy investment. It begins the phase-out of fossil fuels while addressing job losses in coal mining and oil-producing regions. Now, this is a partial list. Biden imposed a moratorium on new oil and gas leases and permitting for public lands and waters. Biden did not ban fracking because he can't. Only an act of Congress can do that. He directed federal agencies to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies that they have control over and to stimulate permitting and deployment of clean energy. He asked Congress to finally phase out taxpayer subsidies for fossil fuels that have existed for more than a century. He boosts investment in advanced battery research and carbon capture. He directed the entire U.S. fleet of government vehicles to shift to all electric, which in turn, he says, will create 1 million auto worker jobs. He set up a White House task force to coordinate emissions reduction policies and ensure that 40% of federal climate investments go to creating jobs in marginalized communities. His order rebuilds the nation's federal science agencies and research offices. He implements measures to protect scientists and scientific integrity from the political interference that became epidemic during the Trump administration. He will establish a new modern-day climate conservation corps, modeled after the Depression-era Civilian Conservation Corps, to employ young people to build climate-resilient infrastructure. He set up a task force to create new investment in coal country and communities reliant on fossil fuel jobs to utilize the skills they already have where they live to clean up closed mines and abandoned oil and gas wells and build new clean energy projects.
And that is very important. He wants to give them jobs, new jobs, cleaning up the mess that we have made for the past I don't know how many decades.
Biden also labeled the climate crisis as a national security threat. Special international climate envoy, the former Secretary of State John Kerry, countered the corporate media's fixation on cost, noting we are already spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year on climate disasters.
So we're spending the money, folks. We're just not doing it smart. We're not doing it in the way that would actually sustain us for the long term.
Biden closed out his historic climate day with this.
Our plans are ambitious, but we are America. We're bold. We're unwavering in the pursuit of jobs and innovation, science and discovery. We can do this. We must do this, and we will do this.
We will see if we will do this. I just have a feeling that Republicans in Congress want to do none of it. For much more on all of this and the stories we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Texas Congressman Chip Roy evidently took exception to AOC's taking Ted Cruz to the proverbial woodshed in probably one of the most public ways possible with the series of tweets. And I guess, he's now calling for her head. And if Nancy Pelosi doesn't do it, she doesn't do something, he's going to be forced to find alternative means. I'm not sure what alternative means. Is that like constructing a gallows outside the Capitol and chanting, to hang somebody? Is that what it is? Because we've already seen that. We've already seen that. It's probably part of the reason why AOC was so mad to begin with. Just a thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So, alternative means. What in Congress would be alternative means to something that AOC did?
Well, what they're talking about, I think, is what's becoming popular, which is kind of, frankly, asinine on all sides. Now, when somebody does something, I'm not talking about criminal action, but something, they're talking about, and probably in this nature, they're talking about trying to expel them. And I heard this the other day about one of the Republicans. They were saying about one of the Democrats. And as far as that goes, there's an ethics committee which has to go through that process. You just can't start bringing up votes, forcing votes on the floor of the House, this congressman from Texas, to expel her. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a crazy moment. I mean, I look at this.
It is.
I look at this story that they're in the process of there's a censure resolution against this Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I got to tell you is way out there on the ledge.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I guess this Cori Bush, this Representative Cori Bush, she's I guess changing offices because this Marjorie Taylor Greene's staff and her keep berating this Cori Bush's staff. She's moving for safety reasons. I mean, it's kind of just nuts. It's nuts.
Well, it is. I mean, it's so out of control. And then the other path that they have to watch is when members will make outrageous statements. We can go down a list of, Republicans, and there's a couple of Democrats, that I could name.
Sure.
And then immediately somebody says, expel them. I'm like, okay. I think that they need to, if they're going to do certain things, go through the ethics committee and censure them. And if you actually censure them and it happens and is at a certain level, then they could actually be expelled. So instead of them arguing with each other in the hallways, I think they probably need to start filing ethics charges, which a member can do.
Or what we do is we just change the whole system, and we can have like Survivor Congress.
Oh, okay, right.
I mean, we had the reality star president. Why not have a reality star Congress? Because look, what the weird thing that's coming out of all of this, in the era of Trump, we now have these people who have become, they're social media stars. I mean, they're now real celebrities, with real sales power and real opportunities to reach people.
Well, they do, and then also the media. They should understand something too. The media feeds it. The media will, and of course, the media giveth. I'm talking about corporate national, but the media giveth and it taketh too. They'll take certain people, highlight them, and then take them apart. So they'll feed on this back and forth, which after a while is just not going to achieve much whatsoever. So
no, and this is the weird thing for me. And look, I admit that on a certain level, I'm guilty of this as well because I've been focused on this Lauren Boebert way more than I should be. And all of her gun fetish nonsense and the insanity that comes out of her Twitter account. But she's one of these people who came to Congress with really a slick PR campaign on how to grab people's attention and really load the coffers up. And she's doing it. She's become a media darling on the right.
Right. And they do that. And of course, then they get attacked. And if they get attacked, I just saw where Liz Cheney, who's, being hit by, I think it was, isn't one of the senators hitting her, maybe Holly, or I don't know.
No, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is actually he's in Wyoming. I'm going, do you know where Florida is? Do you know Florida's having, they're getting hit by a pandemic? Why the hell would you go to Wyoming?
Well, I just saw where they're having a virtual fundraiser for her. K Street is, charging to the rescue. And I'm not saying they shouldn't defend her, but you can just see what's going on out there. Hey, I'm getting hit. I'm in trouble. Fundraiser time. $1,000 for a photo op on Zoom.
Yeah.
On
Zoom.
Going down. Yeah, on Zoom now. Not even in real life.
We'll send you a cutout.
Now, I thought of something else, too. These members are doing fundraisers on Zoom, and you can push a button if you're on Zoom and record that. So they better be very careful. It's harder in person to do that.
No, I mean, we're just, as I was saying earlier, the sad reality is we're not the country that I grew up in. And things have changed and I think for the much worse. As I started off with, one of the worst stories that I saw is they're talking about putting a permanent fence around the Capitol.
Oh, can I say something about that?
Yeah,
this
please.
Is a major correction in the media. I think it was CNN. I was actually going to write him a note, but that is not the first time it was proposed.
No?
It was actually proposed after 9/11. It was proposed. Now, it didn't get into a formal vote or anything, but the chief of police, the sergeant of arms, came to Steny. Would have been Steny Hoyer at the time, who's now number 2 Democrat in Congress, came to us and said, we want to build a fence and then block everything off, 6 blocks away. And of course, Steny and I both in unison said no.
No, it was summarily dismissed, as it should have been.
Oh, yeah, now it has. So that was brought up once, so they're wrong on that. But this has traction. I mean, this actually has traction. And I'm looking at that saying, you've got to be kidding me. Which will virtually block people. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have safety there. The Capitol is it's got people employed. They need to be protected, the staff. But to just block off the ability to go see your members, it's not cool.
No, it's
Won't
horrible,
work.
and it's wrong.
Terrible. I saw that today.
No, and as I started off the show with, I remember when I was a kid, I used to be able to, take the RTA Rapid in from the 150th Street station right into the airport. The escalator would take us right up into one of the gates, right at the metal detector. You could walk through the metal detector, joke with the guy who was at the metal detector about the guy in front of you having a bomb or a gun, and we're going to hijack the place and go to Cuba. You could joke about that back then. You can't do any of that stuff now.
Sure.
You can't even get into the airport now.
Right.
And it's a completely different world, and it's because everybody is just so amped up. I think it's because we've got many more armed people with arsenals doing crazy stuff, and a social media structure that is just puts out some of the most vile stuff possible.
Oh, it's a crazy time, and people, we saw what happened with the Capitol. They can be, decided to go do things. But I think the Capitol itself has to get a hold on itself, to surround it with a round fence. I know originally what they were proposing, which was like, I don't know, it was 14, 15 feet tall, and spiked and everything else. And just to do that, and there's kind of other means and thought of what they're doing too, Rick. Some people be like, well, we want to do that, and privately they want to do it to keep people from being able to go in and meet with the members of Congress.
Yeah, no, I'm dead set against it.
8 to 10 constituents in there with an issue sitting in your office, you've got to face them.
Yep. No, I'm dead set against it. I think it's wrong, and hopefully saner and smarter people will prevail in this. The last thing I wanted to get into you with China. China has evidently warned us that if we get involved in that Taiwan thing and that independence thing, it means war. That's kind of that's a little tougher talk than I think we've ever heard from the Chinese. No.
Well, it is, and they're trying to push President Biden. But President Biden, through his administration, has already made a statement about Taiwan, and that's why they're freaking out. If you want to really freak the Chinese out, you can either talk about Taiwan, Hong Kong, or the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
One of those three. It really does. It completely freaks them out. And President Biden put out his statement on China already, which was an excellent statement. It's balanced. He wants to talk about communication with them, but he made it very clear about Taiwan's support, tariffs, and the fact that they're going to have to come to the table to talk. So I don't think China likes that. So I think they're trying to get extremely aggressive right now with the new administration to see how much they can push Biden. But the one thing about President Biden, and you and I talked about this last week, and a lot of people don't realize his absolute expertise above anything has been foreign policy. I mean, years of it. So he's, I think, going to be fairly clever with them. And, this was something originally people were worried about. I was worried about it because he had made a statement that was pretty well publicized, remember?
That was me.
Yeah, they're not the bad guys. And you were upset. I was upset about it, and a lot of other people. But I think he's showing that, he's not going to be pushed around by them, and he's hit the hot button, Taiwan.
No, and that's, I'm glad to see that he's coming out. Look, so far, and to be honest, what I've seen from him, I'm very happy with. And I know you've got people running around screaming, he's issued all these executive orders. Yeah, he's undoing all the damage that Trump did.
Well, I saw one of those today, actually on a friend of mine's Facebook, and he said in modern times, the actual truth is the most executive orders were back in Franklin Delano Roosevelt's day due to the crisis in the country of the Depression over 13 years. And those are so when they say modern day, I guess they choose the modern day, meaning the last 4 years or whatever.
But the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, but they're counting Biden as the first week. He had more than anybody else the first week. The executive orders have been around for a long time.
Yep.
A long time.
Now, we can argue on both sides whether they're good or they're bad. At the end of the day, you've got the executive branch who's got stuff to get done. And if you've got a dysfunctional Congress, and look, I'm already going, shouldn't we be passing stuff already? Shouldn't there be bills proposed and put forward and moved on? Shouldn't we be talking about this this recovery plan, that's $1.9 trillion thing, getting that moving because people are really struggling? Maybe we could be moving on that instead of bickering over who's going to control the Senate.
Well, it's very interesting, Rick, because the Congress is in just absolute total chaos for a wide variety of reasons, and the White House is very calm. In fact, President Biden's statement, I think it was yesterday or the day before, was not everything has to be a war, with each other. And I thought it was interesting. The White House really has been very calm, putting out some executive order policies, formulating some, definite proposals for legislation, and doing what they need to do with COVID.
Yeah,
and meanwhile, the Congress is thank goodness they aren't all armed, put it that way.
Well, there is that, but so far very happy. I'm so glad to hear President Biden My stress level goes down.
There you go.
But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, every time I hear President Biden, I go, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'll take a quick break. We'll be back to wrap things up. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1834. That was the first time in United States history that a president called in federal troops to settle a labor dispute, and it certainly would not be the last. President Andrew Jackson ordered federal troops to quiet the workers on the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. The workers were predominantly Irish, but also included Germans, Dutch, and African Americans. They were digging a canal along the route of the Potomac River, which had rapids that made it difficult to traverse. The primary purpose of the canal was to bring coal from the Allegheny Mountains to eastern port cities. The goal was to connect the ports to the Ohio River and Ohio Valley. Work on the project was grueling. Rocky ground made digging the canal extremely difficult. Workers labored 12 and even 15 hours a day. They often had to work in ditches with mud or water up to their waists. They lived in poor conditions in shanty towns along the canal route. In 1932, cholera swept through the work camps, leaving death in its wake. Work stoppages plagued the project, which had originally been conceived by George Washington. 10 different significant incidents of labor unrest occurred during the more than 2 decades the project was underway. Workers became fed up with hard labor, low wages, and dangerous conditions. Andrew Jackson sent in troops to stop the workers' rebellion. The C&O Canal never made it to the Ohio Valley. The coming of the railroad derailed the completion of the project 180 miles from its planned ending point. All was not lost, however, as the president's action to send in troops to suppress workers set a precedent that others would follow in the years ahead. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Tennessee, leave it to Tennessee. Again, it's one of these stories that I just, I guess Tennessee's the state that, you can bring your gun to the bar, get all liquored up and go shooting people. Evidently, Tennessee lawmakers proposed to make it illegal to ban someone from your store from goods or services because they're not wearing a mask. Going to make it officially the law. Senate Bill 320, filed by Republican Senator Joey Hensley. He says the bill states that it is a discriminatory practice for a person to deny an individual the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, and accommodations of a place of public accommodation, resort, or amusement on the grounds of race, creed, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, the wearing of or use of medical devices, or whether an individual has received medical treatment. I'm going, I'm not quite sure about what your point is. I would think you would want people to wear masks to get us through the pandemic, but interesting. So were you against, the cake thing? Because now I'm just going, okay, because I saw sex in there. Are we now considering that as well? Just very, very twisted. And what's scary to me is there are people out there who are defiant in the fact that they refuse to wear a mask. And look, we're all going to suffer for it. The places that are seeing these variants popping up, It's popping up because it exploded and it had a chance to mutate. And we didn't get it under control early enough. So, scary times. Anyway, Saturday night, 7 p.m., big trivia night. Make sure you show up to our trivia night. We've got links out on how you can register for that. It's going to be a great time. I hope to see everyone there. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. See you Saturday night, 7 p.m. for trivia night. Going to be a good time. See you back here again.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.